are live now. And recording, which means I can close this for now. And what else? Close this. Okay, so how's everybody doing?
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm so excited to be here, Venita.
I actually, my allergy is really bad today, so it's hard to, because you can't talk and breathe at the same time. You can't breathe and walk at the same time. You can't talk and breathe. But yeah, it's kind of, you got to concentrate on which one you want to do. Talk or breathe.
Which did you decide?
I'm going to alternate.
A little of both, huh?
A little of both.
Oh, no, that might be a little greedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, since you're having trouble talking and breathing,
yeah,
I won't ask you to read. But let's go ahead and get started since we are running late. And let me introduce everyone to, I started to say Global Black Feminist Reading Circle, but actually, this is Reading for Change, a collective journey. Cluster 1, meaning its first book, we are reading together under this name. And the book that we are reading is The Coming Plague, A World, why do I always have to read this? Newly Emerging Diseases in a World Out of Balance by Laurie Garrett. And we started reading this book on August 26th of this year, and we'll continue it or scheduled to continue it through February 24th, 2021. Tonight we're reading all of chapter 8 and the first half of chapter 9. And you can learn more about the Global Reading for Change on our YouTube page by that name and our Facebook page by that name. And my name is Michelle Odom, and I'm located here in Brooklyn, New York. And Venita, can you?
Sure. My name is Venita Walker. I'm joining you from Cromwell, and this is my ticket into the night's reading circle.
All right. And Rick, you're muted.
Hi, my name is Rick Ferry. I'm from Queens, New York.
Okay. Everybody's so quiet tonight. And just to remind you, next week we're on a break. Maybe we're all kind of quiet because we need a break. So we have a break next week. And we come back in 2 weeks on November 4th, reading the remainder of chapter 9 and all of chapter 10. Chapter 9 that we're reading tonight is on urban centers. Chapter 10 is on STDs and injecting drug users. And let's see. You feel like reading the summary, Rick?
Sure. So chapter 8, Revolution, Genetic Engineering, and the Discovery of Oncogenes, reviews the ways science and medicine were forever changed by discoveries in manipulating genetic material, with optimism once again pervading biological research, and new insights on genes that cause cancer. Discoveries in genetic science proceed rapidly in the 1980s, with researchers building on each other's work and revolutionizing humanity's understanding of the formidable nature of the microbial world. One scientist compared the viral load of cancer-causing genes to a spacecraft. Harvard Medical School virologist Bernard Fields likened viruses to spaceships on a voyage into a hostile environment. Their payload, the viral DNA or RNA, replete with all its jumping gene and transposing potential, was hidden inside a delivery system that included propulsion and navigation systems and a protective capsule capable of withstanding the viral equivalent of an Apollo spacecraft's heated re-entry into Earth's atmosphere. Then, at the start of chapter 9, Microbe Magnets, Urban Centers of Disease, explores how the growth of cities transformed the relationship between humans and microbes, and debates on best ways to control the spread of disease. From ancient times, urban centers have provided ample supplies of human hosts, places where lice, bedbugs, ticks, and other organisms can and do thrive and easily transmit. This chapter considers the ideal environment cities provide for microbial advance, the efforts scholars have made to understand ancient plagues, and methods cities have used to attempt to stop plagues at the front door. We also see through chapter 9 the historic pattern of plague, famine, and economic collapse. Additionally, the chapter reviews plagues in history such as the Great Plague, epidemics and pandemics of leprosy, tuberculosis, and cholera, and how improved living conditions preceded the decline of disease in the world's cities. Always open to attributing meaning to events we don't adequately comprehend, one response to the Black Death was particularly interesting. The Brotherhood of Flagellants were Christian men who daily beat themselves to the edge of death to purge the sins that were responsible for their disease. All over Europe, these men, encouraged by crowds of crazed aristocrats and peasants alike, would thrash themselves with leather whips embedded with small iron spikes. The terrorized European population did everything save what might have spared them, ridding their cities of rodents and fleas. Bathing was thought to be dangerous, and few Europeans ever washed. Finally, chapter 9 looks at the ideal conditions cities provide for the spread of STDs and the debate of what factors led to an explosion of syphilis across the globe in 1495, coinciding coincidentally with the explorations of Christopher Columbus.
Thank you. Yeah, that flagellance thing.
It still exists.
It still exists?
Jesuitic brothers are supposed to do that sometimes, but not too much, because if it's too much, that means it's you're finding pleasure in it. So you have to find the perfect. It has to hurt, but you must not think that because you're so hurt, God loves you more. If you do that, then you have to stop because they're insane. So.
Well, I had never heard of them, so that gave me pause. Also, if you go all the way down to near the bottom of question 19.
19.
So yeah. Down where it says toward the end of the first paragraph in question 19, where it says godliness had failed their dead friends and relatives. Indeed, the highest percentage of deaths had occurred among priests. Now she's talking about STDs there.
That's what I said,
so
girl. I caught that.
First, I read it wrong, and my first thought was, well, why were more priests dying of STDs than anybody else?
I caught that right there, because I said, wait a minute, hold up. I said, they died more, okay.
And I said, oh my God, my 21st century mind is just so corrupted, because that's not what she was saying.
Well, that's what I was thinking too. I was like, well, this has been going on for a long time. All right. Because that's how our minds are.
There's something people forget. In 1495, the Borgias were owning the papal throne. So that means that technically it was the Spaniards. Well, here's the thing. Monogamy, people confuse the thing. In the Catholic Church, priests have a originally their vow was of celibacy. They added abstinence later. Originally, a lot of priests, not monks, were among rich people. So the first in the family would become the direct duke, or the new count. The second one would marry a family or join a commerce, the army, whatever. And the third one would always be a priest or a bishop. So most of them were actually had mistresses, and like the Pope had a mistress. He had a son. He had three sons, actually. One from all from his mistress.
Really?
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
I
great
heard
show about
that.
that with Jeremy Irons called The Borgias. They had an orgy on Christmas 1492, sexual orgy in the middle of where is currently the throne of the Pope. That's all well known in Europe. It's strange
Yes.
that Americans don't know Catholics were
Well,
dirty.
no, actually, I did. And speaking on the
Just
Catholic,
me.
yeah, speaking on a Catholic note, now I know the coffers are low, and I know the Catholic Church is the biggest business next to probably Amazon at this point.
Amazon has nothing on the Catholic Church.
So
No.
listen. I heard in the news today that now they are embracing same-sex unions.
Not embracing, acknowledging them.
Well, acknowledging them for the Catholic, well, it all adds up to capitalism. There's wealth in the gay communities, and the coffers are low. It's all about politics. It has nothing to do with anything else. It's all about the dollar bill. The dollar bill. The dollar bill has nothing to do nothing.
I also think the Pope wants to help some friends of his who are, because why Benedict XVI left, he learned that there were gay orgies between bishops.
Yeah.
So maybe Francis is trying to find a middle ground somewhere.
I don't know, but I thought that was
church.
Different today.
Catholic Church.
Lethargic. So many things happening. I thought it was very different today. And once again, my belief is the coffers are low.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing has to do with anything in a church, whether it's Catholic or otherwise, when the coffers are low. The pandemic has caused them to lose an awful lot of money.
Nobody's sending money on Sundays. Why they should, you're at church, right. you donate. What are people doing?
Okay.
But let's stay on track. Venita, you said you wanted to last week you wanted her to talk about some plagues. So she talked about some plagues. So what did you find? What did either one of you find interesting, or what did you learn from this chapter?
Which chapter are we doing for 8? I mean the first half?
Either one.
I learned that if you're poor, you're doomed. I learned that from both chapters, from disease. Example, actually, that's one thing I learned, that you have no chance in hell. When plagues hit different parts of Europe and Asia, the wealthy fled and left the poor on their own, as the same thing is happening now. The wealthy in this country got in their jets and they get left out of here. Everyone's mute, and it left us here with a person that's going by probably 13th century antiquated thoughts that it's going to either go away or it is a sign of Satan trying to get itself, rid itself out of your soul. So that's what I've learned. And it was very sad, actually. At least back in the 13th century, at some point, after having tens of thousands of people die, after killing tens of thousands of Jews, they lived in the slums. So, of course, they were the dirty ones, the untouchables at that time. That they even knew to draw the bridges, to tell the peasants to get their behinds in the house. I mean, this is not with any of the technology and so-called sophisticated scholarly scientist crap that we have today. They knew that much from past experience. you know, that we need to do something. Or if there was a first sign after that someone was ill with a plague, they shut it down. They were like doing that contact tracing right away. Bam. Now we're in 2020. How sad and shameful is it that we are in the position that we are in? And we're talking about 1300s. 1300s, where we got people running around here acting like idiots, wanting to free themselves because you are infringing on their civil liberties by asking them to cover their mouths and wash their behinds, which they just discovered that, apparently. And today we're dealing with that. That's disgraceful. I mean, it's past disgraceful. It has to be something mentally going on. I put everything on mental illness because I can't have no other explanation. And back then, without Dr. Fauci, without any of the stuff that we have, they knew that we had to shut it down. What's wrong with us?
You know, you're saying that.
Let me just put in a reminder. I didn't remind us about our time limit. Are you keeping time, Venita?
Yeah.
3 minutes. Go on, Rick.
Thank you.
3 minutes, and if you'd like to have more time,
Can I ask?
yes.
Excellent. No, you were saying I think there's a difference. Is that the strange thing about our pandemic is that in the past day, even the superstitious people who said that it was Satan or God punishing them or whatnot, still acknowledged how severe it was.
Yes.
Now it's like it's a hoax. I never remembered any time in history. That's the big difference. The Great Plague, they were like, "Oh my God, it's here," but they were all they were superstitious. So instead of doing what was right for them, they bled themselves, thinking it was a treatment, making them weaker. They would gather to pray when they shouldn't have, but because they were ignorant.
Yes.
But they acknowledge the reality despite their ignorance. Today, we have all this knowledge. We have microwaves, cars, things we don't realize we're flying. It's insane. People didn't fly a century ago or 2 centuries ago.
That's right.
And all this knowledge, and in the end, most of us are just experts on Star Wars, my generation. Nobody reads, but we know everything about stuff nobody cares about, like Star Wars, Star Trek, but we think it's a hoax. So is comfort creating people who mentally are unable? It's no longer mental health. Is comfort creating an animal that has no ability to recognize reality anymore? Like it's a cognitive issue at that point. It's no longer just mental health. You go through therapy. No, it's literally your brain has been transformed to be unable to cope with something. I don't know. It's so strange. I have no explanation.
Well, your comment, Rick, was making me think about TV. Television was created in 1950, so it was pretty young at the time that Venita and I came into the world about a decade later. But we're really like the first generation to grow up with TV always being a part of our life. And I just wonder if things have, in addition to all the other things, the undereducation that we have going on, the high incidence of drug abuse, the mass disinformation we're dealing with, but TV. I'm just wondering if TV has somehow blurred our capacity to differentiate fact from make believe.
Just not for long, but maybe we were desensitized, because television was also a great tool for me as a kid to learn about the world. that I didn't know of. Maybe because my family was watching documentaries, animal documentaries. So maybe I like TV and I wasn't watching, but I wonder if it's not just TV. It's, you were talking about screens. It makes me wonder if we haven't become desensitized to reality, because my generation, we saw more naked bodies that any human being has ever saw in the past. It's called internet porn. What does it do to the human brain? Not in the sense of mental health, but literally we can't acknowledge something real anymore. And I heard a study about porn, for example, where they discovered that couples have a big problem right now, is that they are uncomfortable with intimacy because they watch too much porn. So they fantasize sex as being like porn, and actual real love and sex is not like porn. So there's a disconnect between their desire, what they would really want to do, and what their brain is telling them to do because of porn. Is it like that with pandemic, in the sense that we saw so many movies about conspiracies and viruses launched by bad guys in Die Hard or whatnot, that it's got to be the government? I remember that movie. I don't know. It's
It's some strangeness going on, but let's since you brought up sex, let's look at question 18. Venita, you feel like reading that one?
1 second. Yes. Cities of wealthy, industrialized worlds had in common with your poor countries ideal environments for transmitting STDs. Density and amenity of urban life offered many opportunities for sex. It had been so since the times of houses of male and female prostitution. The double standard of chastity in the home and the risque behavior and anonymity of the urban night dates back as far as the beginning of written history. How much did the emergence of HIV/AIDS change these risque practices among humans, from your view? How are people expressing themselves sexually these days, given what you've heard or experienced?
And I was thinking about you when I wrote that question.
I just don't think, would you like me to answer, to give my opinion? In my opinion, I believe that people are not expressing themselves sexually, period. Which is another reason why we're having a rash of mental illness and cognitive dissonance and everything else. Because in the 70s, well, anyways, years ago, I'm sorry, I'm trying to be serious this evening. I'm trying to even not feel well, but I can't do it. But years ago, without all the technology and science that we have today, we never had problems in those areas. Folks were happy, whether you were poor, rich, homeless, it didn't make a difference. We were able to distinguish reality from fallacy. There was no problem with none of that stuff. There was Playgirl magazine, Playboy magazine. There was something even worse. There was a Hustler. I could name quite a few of them. We snuck into our parents' or grandparents' stash on occasion, just being nosy, because we didn't have Game Boy or anything. That's what we did, And we saw naked bodies. We weren't desensitized. We didn't lose our mind. We still knew reality from fallacy and fiction. So And sex, again, I don't think, from my talking to younger people, they're not having sex. They're not dating. And it's before COVID. COVID didn't bring that to a stop. It was a damper on that prior to COVID. Because you have Snapchat. You have the other social media outlets.
Talk about the thing with the Asian women laying in the bed, like playing like a doll thing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, girl. Let me tell you about that.
Oh, Twitch. Twitch.
Oh, excuse me, Rick.
It's good business. It's Twitch. It's not porn technically because it goes against the official settings of the app, but they play like cosplay and very sexy things, just do that stuff and get money from people.
And they get paid. Time. They get paid with some of them just to dress up and put on their porcelain makeup
and have plush toys and play video games.
And some of them just to lay down.
Yeah.
Beside this bachelor, Asian, I mean, with no touching, no kissing, no nothing. Just to lay there and look at each other. She looks at him in the eyes, and he looks at her in the eyes, and they do that for whatever the amount of time is that she's getting paid to do it. So that's another thing. So I guess the point is, depending where you are and in what part of the world you're in, nobody's still having sex, but they have different ways of not having sex. The non-sexual contact, illusion of having sex.
Well, my generation,
how to say that,
but my whole generation was taught that sex could be a punishment. That sex could be, so because of HIV/AIDS, we were like the first generation that got sex ed in France about AIDS and HIV. And we were taught, if you're not careful, if you don't have sex properly, if you don't put a condom, you will die and you will kill people. It'll be your fault. So sex was always, for my generation, a thing of, okay, let's be careful. But because of that, we were actually less cautious, because when people paint you a grim picture of the world, you're like, hey, I don't care, live fast, die young. So you end up doing the opposite of what they tell you, because they always tell you, oh, you're evil if you do that. So you do it because, whatever happens, it's natural. So you don't, and it creates this strange, that's why a lot of kids today, I think, also are in this strange, it's not Christianity anymore, but it's oppression on sex, as sex is not something innocent. It's a burden. And that's what is taught today. And I agree with you, and it becomes a duty. But without a God, it's no longer God. So no. And HIV/AIDS was the big change. And I remember when I was young, people saying, well, that's God's punishment for the gays. Okay. It was something you heard, and you're like, wow. And people would say, AIDS? I didn't wear condom with that girl because I know she's clean. What do you mean she's clean? And I remember my sister, who's white, went to get a test in 1987 or 8 at the beginning, because she had sex with a guy that, she had doubts on. And the gynecologist asked her, was he black? She said, no. Oh, then there's no problem, said the gynecologist. So racism, homophobia, everything that we experience today might actually have started with HIV/AIDS. The way it was used by a lot of people say this is a punishment for the left, the way of life of freedom, having fun. Look, now your punishment. And you hear that in Africa too, which is you don't get AIDS if you're a man who has a lot of women. And also, the more you have sex with virgins, the more you'll cure from AIDS.
Oh, Lord.
So, yeah, I don't know. It was a catalyst of all of, if you think about it, HIV/AIDS did change everything, maybe more than 9/11. And we didn't notice it.
Yeah. That's a shame.
That's what I said. That's a shame. Rick, I'll pray on that for you. Maybe because that's terrible. You really and you think about these things, and the poor young people today, they even look so deprived of everything. when you look at them, and I say that, with not sarcastically, but it makes me sad when they look so deprived of growing naturally and, in every way.
But
whether I have a real food today to eat, they're eating genetically engineered food or this food, not having to be able to enjoy strawberries. Strawberries were candy for us, like a fruit tastes like candy. We didn't get candy. We got a bowl of cherries and peaches and, but not even being able to not even go to the park and see beautiful trees, not even able to have the booty in the park. Who doesn't have booty in the park? That's a right of way. Being a teenager, because you have to remember, we had, some folks had curfews. So therefore, whatever fun you was gonna have, you had to have it between the time you got to school at 7:35 and in the evening when you had to come home and keep your grades tight and get your stuff done, because that was another thing. So all the partying was done when you skip some classes, maybe play a little hooky, go to the park. I feel so sad for the children, the young people. They just have they're not growing naturally.
Yeah, but there's just one last thing on that. There's another development on that. When I was a kid, we would, until 17, 18, before the internet was widespread, we would go to the park. We would go and we would do stupid stuff like drink a beer when we were 15. And today it's impossible. There are cameras everywhere.
Oh, that's true.
You can't be just a kid who,
You can't be a kid.
Oh, yes, it's trespassing, but the kid is just going into that, property. So they're curious. They're not criminals, but we came into an era where it's insane. Like everything's under surveillance, and now it's people, citizens, that instead of intervening and helping people, film you, tweet about you without context, and you're accused of the worst things. You don't know if that woman is racist or not racist. If there are some videos, you know what I mean? I don't like these gotcha videos because I'm wondering where's the context. Who knows what happened before and after? It's just people reporting each other like the Gestapo today. It's become insane. Like everybody's filming everybody, and not for necessarily good stuff. A lot of people who film interactions with the police are traumatized. They filmed it out of citizens' concern. But then you have people filming you and me who are not cops, getting into a fight with somebody, oral fight, and insulting each other, and the day after you lose your job. I'm not sure people understand what we're supposed to do against the government, which is not report each other for stupid stuff. I don't know.
Yeah.
I got friends in Queens say they haven't gotten into a fight in 20 years because of cell phones, not because of the cops.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a brave new world we're in for sure.
An oppressive one, even more oppressive than the world we lived in. Really, cops would ride by. There were lots of kids in the park. Their main concern is there wasn't no violence going on. No one was hurting anyone. That was the only concern. Meanwhile, you have 55 people smoking weed. You know what I'm saying? They drive down the park. The cops people are driving. Their concern was that no one was hurting anybody. Now, you can't even send your child to the park by itself, black or white. Doesn't make a difference. Doesn't do a race. You cannot send your child to the park because some neighbor's going to call simply because your child wants to walk around the park with a couple of friends. And next thing you know, the cops are there and they're doing nothing but what teenagers do. Walk around the park with a couple of friends. They don't have to even be doing, smoking marijuana or even drinking or nothing. They're simply in a park where it's free, it's public, but today it's a crime. Some neighbor's going to call and say they look suspicious. We didn't have that. Do you remember anything like that? I don't remember anything ever happening like that.
Yeah, but let's move along. Let's take a look at question 9. I was also thinking about you when I wrote this one, Venita. Though much about the connection between viruses and cancer remained obscure, it was an accepted tenet of biology by 1982 that viruses could directly, or perhaps through intermediary chemicals or host genes, caused the changes in cells that were the hallmarks of cancer. It was also generally accepted that such viruses might take years to produce clinically noticeable symptoms in those humans or animals who were infected. Thus, the concept of slow viruses had emerged, an idea epidemiologists found extremely challenging because of the difficulty of showing that a population of people have cancer today due to a virus they were exposed to 10 or 20 years ago. Questions. What are some chronic health conditions that fit this description? Should this insight lead patients to temper expectations of medical doctors? What challenges does this aspect of science, the difficulty proving causation, pose for the legal system? And what implications does this aspect of science hold for regulatory systems and the health insurance industry? So I was actually thinking about both of us, Venita, when I wrote that question. We don't have cancer, but both of us have chronic health conditions. And Venita and I met in junior high school when we were both living in Trenton, New Jersey. And neither one of us have lived there since we were about 20 years old. So it's been a minute. But we were both, strong and healthy when we left Trenton. and I don't know what happened along the way, but something happened. But it has occurred to me before, Venita, I don't know if I've ever said to you, I wonder if we both were exposed to something in that Trenton. The motto for the city of Trenton from the old days is Trenton makes, the world takes, because it was a big manufacturing area. And I just wonder, and that's the thing, we'll never prove it. We don't know. You're not going to sue anybody about it. But this is the type of stuff that happens.
Yeah, but then I also think about slow emerging diseases, because lupus is a slow emerging disease for most people, including myself. Again, I didn't realize until my body blew up almost 12 years ago. So I was diagnosed very quickly. But when I looked in retrospect, ended up in the hospital twice with unknown high fevers. They called infectious disease doctors in. I was in St. Francis Hospital twice. And they called infectious disease doctors in. One came from Boston, Mayo Clinic, because they couldn't understand this high fever I had. And I started having all kinds of malfunctions, and they would pump me with antibiotics, and that was not touching anything. It just wasn't doing anything for this high fever, which a lot of things came along with it. And it happened twice. Once when I moved here, when I was 19 years old, it happened then in Connecticut. And then it happened again when I was 28. This unexplained fever, knocked you down. I had to go through all kinds of therapy, went down to 106 pounds. It just, all kinds of kidney malfunctions. It was everything. And it was lupus then. I got this rash on my leg that looked like a round circle, little tiny dots in it with this ring around it.
It wasn't diagnosed then.
Well, it wasn't diagnosed then, but guess what? It blew up when I was 49 years old. And that's when it just threw me down and put me in bed for 2 years, where you're almost near death. But I'm saying leading up to that, in retrospect, I've had lupus probably all my life. When I was a child, I would get sick from the sun. I couldn't go in the sun, ever. I've been there 5 minutes, all of a sudden, mother, she would take me to the doctor. Why is it when she goes in the sun, all of a sudden I just get sick? Well, they didn't know why. and no one can understand or even begin to think about why that was happening. So, but she had sense enough, thank goodness, to take some precautions. I didn't go out in the sun a lot. I had hats on, long sleeves, you know. But it started in the summertime was worse for me, not in the winter. So I think I've had lupus probably all my life. And it took a perfect storm. Something came together, and I think it was when I went away. I got back from Florida, California. I think it was Florida, right prior to a couple months before I buy this went crazy. You're close to the equator down there also. And I think, yeah, so I think I've had all my life. So when you said slow emergence, like lupus, for many people, is a slow emerging disease. Years of all kinds of idiosyncrasies, and you don't understand why. You know, and after I got the disease, I started reading a lot and knowing a lot. Like, wait a minute, that's what that was. That was a discoid lesion that was on my leg, you know, 30 years ago. You know, the sun, now I'm super photosensitive, where I can't have a drop of sun touch my skin. That was why maybe the sun made me so sick. So, you know, it's not a virus or a bacteria. It's inflammatory, whole body, systematic disease, but it is a slow emerging disease that can be confused with a lot of other diseases and has been for many people.
Yeah, yeah.
Carbon dioxide, when you had the poisoning, you can call that a slow emerging situation. Because for years you wonder why you're feeling like you're feeling, you know, with all kinds of symptoms. And then one day it just kind of, you know, it gets progressively worse for you until you did something.
I used to have horrible stomach aches as a little girl. And my mother would take me to the doctor, and he would give me this horrible green liquid to take. And my mother told me years later that it was a placebo, which really pissed me off, because if you were going to give me a placebo, why not make it sweet or chocolate or something?
They were just mean back there for no reason. Just mean for no reason.
But I probably had the beginning of, you know, what I now know is a liver condition.
Right.
I probably had the beginning of it as a little girl, but, you know, so that's one of the things that I think this book is probably helping me understand more how little medicine actually knows. You know, because I think I'm one of those people that, you know, I'm always wondering, why can't my doctors do better?
I diagnosed myself. I told my doctor, I think I have lupus. When I was laying on that table, half dead, the day my whole body blew up, my hair fell out in my hand, I couldn't breathe. I told my doctor, I think I have lupus. He said, well, Mrs. Walker, why do you feel that way? I said, because I really believe that that's what I have. Sure enough. And that's the day. If you go to the doctor, you need to be prepared to tell them what you think you have, because they're not doing any investigative work. That's out.
They are, but the problem is, to the point of that chapter, and even if it's since 1982, I would really mitigate that statement that it was an accepted tenet. The Nobel Prize was given to them around 2005 or 6. It takes time, but the idea that viruses cause cancers, but not was only possible through genetics. Otherwise, it didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And genetics was a breakthrough science that still to this day people don't understand that much outside of medicine, because you're talking about lupus or your condition, Michelle. A doctor was looking for a cause, an external. The whole idea was there's an external agent hurting you. That's our definition of disease. If we can't find that agent, you have no disease. It's in your brain. Therefore, lupus, all these conditions are genetic, partly, and the environment is the trigger of that potential.
It certainly
was
is.
not something to them. The environment is too vague. And remember, they had this, it goes back to this idea of canceling diseases. If we find the agent through vaccination, we kill the agent.
Yes.
Diseases are the past. They didn't understand what genetics were showing is that our bodies have auto-destructive systems, and we never know when they're going to hit. It might be cancer. It might be cardiovascular issues. I don't know. Maybe tomorrow I'm dead. Maybe I have a chronic disease that, like you, that I don't know of, and one day it's going to make sense. But the thing is that doctors are still not, the doctors still train with the old school. Find the agent. Find the cause, not, hey, this patient is clearly having symptoms. How do I understand these symptoms to relieve the patient from these symptoms? And not, well, if there's no cause, the patient is, I don't know what, let's not do nothing. You know?
Mhm.
Do something. And it goes back to the beginning of the book. These old doctors are like, oh, that's malaria. But you didn't, yeah, I know. They knew looking at you, malaria. Oh, lupus. No, you have lupus. You have, no, that's not malaria. You have lupus. Like they knew. So maybe.
Yeah.
Well, with information, there's still no connection. That's what I don't understand. If they ask you, when you go to the doctors for many, many years, you fill out questionnaires. And they asked you about things that you've had, things that family members might have had. One of those are, has anyone ever had arthritis? Has anyone ever had, those are on there. So why isn't there a connection between autoimmune diseases? Because that's what it is. It's genetic for me.
Because in the past,
it could be,
they were not acknowledged. MS, epilepsy, lupus were all considered, you were possessed. Remember, people were considered possessed because, again, no agent outside of you causing the disease. You must be possessed. In the past, poor people with lupus were exorcised.
Well, that is true. They didn't even approach it that way. It was just grotesque. It was a werewolf disease.
Exactly. So I think it's very recent that people have acknowledged autoimmune diseases. Very recent. And it's thanks to genetics.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right. Let's look at let's see. Where's that question about my boy? Yeah, let's read question. Let's read question 10. Rick, you want to read that one?
Sure. The microbes' transmissive success was guaranteed among the city's poor, and every urban center had its marginalized neighborhoods where malnourished, immunodeficient people lived in high-density squalor. Urban poverty and disease went hand in hand, not only because insufficient diets weakened people's immune systems, but also because of their living conditions. If the Roman patricians occasionally suffered dysentery because of bacteria in the aqueducts, the plebeian downstream were guaranteed a doubled exposure due to the additional bacterial burden of the patricians' contaminated waste. The fake president said he's not contagious. Lol. What do you think of a person who would go out hosting rallies across the country within days of his escape from the hospital where he was being treated for a highly contagious and deadly disease? It seemed Middle America scoffed at New York region where we were hit with the novel coronavirus. Of course, today they have their own worries. Do you think there is an optimal size for urban living? Given what we know about the conditions that allow microbes to thrive, and what we know about disease transmission, and what we know about how to end poverty, malnutrition, poor housing, and squalor, how would society benefit by redistribution of wealth, and what stop us from making those changes? Well, there's a lot of questions there. Regarding an optimal size for urban living, I think clearly we know. We have a model. Those white neighborhoods that were not hit so badly by coronavirus. Houses, individual houses for each family, where there's a garden where people can go outside and not become insane. Water, potable water, delivery, home delivery, those services. So in the end, you see that the perfect society is the one they were showing in a little bit the images in the 1950s of, you remember when in 2000 everybody will have a rocket and their own garden, an android robot. And this society didn't happen. And and the reason is the problem urban living only has meaning if there's competition. People go to the city to not because they want to have a stable, balanced life. When you think about it, it's to succeed. Lots of people who don't care about success and competition live on the countryside, live in places where they have their home, their little life. So it's I don't know. I think the problem urban centers were born originally to as commerce centers and places where voyagers could sell things to others, and also as religious centers, power centers. So I don't know. It's a tough question because when you look at most urban areas that are clean enough to never have epidemics, the strange, well, not the strange, the paradox is that you destroy nature. You raise forests. The problem is when you mix urban living and nature, and that's what the poor represent. They're the outskirts of the cities in Europe, always the places near the forests, always a mix of animals and homes. And you look at the centers of big European cities, Paris, Rome, it's beautiful, it's empty. No, and so I think that it's I think disease is a metric of power, who gets infected and who doesn't. And I think nothing's changed since the Roman times. Nothing. And I wouldn't even talk about wealth redistribution.
Right?
People talk about redistribution of wealth. It's not even wealth. Obviously, if somebody doesn't have food, they'll be hungry, so they'll try to steal the food. So crime will happen. Give food to somebody, they won't steal the food, and so on and so on. It's just, how much money are we actually making of not having a civil war and people dying? Versus, this is a question we need to ask, economists, and I know there are models like that. A society where everybody has a house, hygiene, minimum to live, to really live, not just survive. Is it really communism, or is the economy thriving? Because right now it's just the one person thriving. So it's not really the economy thriving. It's people making money, but the economy, it's all of us. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I've digressed a lot.
Yeah, no, I get it. And it is a hard question. The this thing about Donald running around the country. I just had to express my displeasure. I have a very weak connection. Am I frozen?
No.
No.
Okay, I keep getting the message that I have a weak connection. I did make you a co-host, Rick. If I get kicked out again, of course I'll try to come back. But if I get locked out, just be looking. I may need you to let me back in. That situation of him escaping from the hospital and running around the country after he's already soiled all the people in this midst. It's just beyond me. I just cannot grasp what is going on here with him and with the people who show up at his rallies. I mean, did he actually have COVID-19? It just...
He still has it.
You believe he still has it? So
and
therefore...
This is something people don't talk about. The reason why doctors were saying these things is that there's a rule in medicine. Your patient is your patient. If your patient tells you to tell his mother, his friends that he's doing really fine, you have to. The patient is sovereign. You are not allowed to disclose medical information if the patient tells you not to, and Trump obviously didn't want to. Melania is still contagious. She's still coughing, and Trump is still coughing and still having bouts, and you can die of it brutally without fever a few days later. Now he's getting over injected with probably the best, which is, I'm not going to do any advertising, but we know that a certain pharmaceutical company from the state of New York has managed to put together something that seems to be working. It's just $100,000 the injection. What was really astonishing is I heard that AIDS and the Pentagon had discouraged him of doing something before leaving. He wanted to get a Superman t-shirt, get out of the hospital pretending he was dying and sick, and all of a sudden turning towards his supporters and opening and showing a Superman and laughing and walking by. They stopped him from doing that. So I think I wasn't upset. I was just noticing one thing that's strange is that I don't think he canceled the virtual debate with Biden because of the rules. They're still going to cut the mics, but because he was still having bouts of cough. He had them on what his name, the egghead, the idiot. At Fox News, there's a lot. His friend, one of okay, it's Fox News stuff.
Limbaugh.
No, Fox News, the new one, the one who didn't get caught for sexual harassment yet.
Oh, I do my best not to watch.
Not Tucker Carlson, the other one. The one who had Michael Cohen as a lawyer. We discovered that for court filing. What is his name? Oh my God.
I stay away from those guys.
He was huffing on the call, and you could see the guy was like, and Trump would go on mute. You could hear it going on mute. So he's still sick, but I think that the guy is becoming dangerous because we're talking about religious people with the Great Plague. I take back what I was saying. The Great Plague still exists, and those religious people are still around, but now they're QAnon and Trump voters. It's a religion. Only what he does is what TV evangelists used to do. The crazy stuff he does, it's the same. Goodbye, coronavirus. It's gone. Miracle. Oh, I'm cured.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the kind of disturbing thing for me in this chapter, and really throughout the book, is just seeing, it's just like we're not growing, we're not evolving, we're not learning as a species. We're just going around in circles, and it just doesn't make any sense to me. Anita, anything on that question? Question 10.
Anita? Oh.
No, I think we'll move along. There's just so much going on there.
Yeah.
I mean, speak about Trump and just this. Again, learned from this chapter is that, we're living in a world with like antiquated thinking, like we're back in the 1300s. I'm still amazed that, again, there's something, and Rick says it's not necessarily all mental illness. Some of it's just being desensitized or cognitive dissonance. It has to be. It's bigger than that. It has to be, because again, with nothing, they did know that you will die. At one point in Europe, Asia, China, they were walking through the streets with this dead bodies all over everywhere. 1,000 people are dying a day. And and this is 2020. And they still had
people need to seek bodies.
They didn't know what it was, but they still had a healthy fear of it. We don't even have a healthy fear of it. It's like, whatever. If my president said I don't need a mask, then I don't need one. What kind of shit is that? So it's just. I just think it's something else is going on. It really is. It has to be something. I don't know if we've been taking, if something from maybe out of our universe or somewhere else that's taking over people's mind. It can't be just desensitized because of playing too much Game Boy. I mean, it has to be something else going on here.
Well, today I was listening to the latest episode. I like to listen to Gaslight Nation.
Yes.
And one of the things they were talking about was this new weapon technology where they can beam like a microwave at your brain and put thoughts inside your head, put words inside your head, kick off some of these, trigger some of these ailments that are waiting to come out. And apparently it's just one of those crazy things that our government has been working on. Maybe one day we'll get a chance to read Homo Deus by Harari, which is a futuristic kind of book, but he goes in a lot about some of the high technology stuff that's going on. That's really crazy. So, what you're saying, Venita, is not, it's not out of the question. There really could be something going on.
There is a hypothesis among some data searchers that we don't share because there's a ethical dilemma in sharing that information. But just to not give it without asking for your consent first, it's what we call it, don't look it up, except if you're sure to look it up. It's called the Basilic paradox, or the Basilic problem. It's a philosophical problem that was uttered by a student in 1994, and in one of the first emails to one of his teachers, and the teacher said, "This is insane, stop, do not talk about that." And in other words, talks about what we call singularity, which is the event of an intelligence outside of a living organism. An intelligence that is no longer bounded by any physical. So it's not just AI, it's AI that found a way to calculate without a medium, which is feasible if the AI confuses with the fundamental energies of the universe. But that's so sometimes people wonder, maybe the AI is singularity already happened. And what we're experiencing is all those cell phones, all these computers, it's not a human being manipulating us. It's the algorithms are too complex to be controlled manually by humans, and they're already telling us what to read to make us insane and kill each other. So it's something that's coming around. Like people are like, wait, maybe it's Skynet already. Like, look, Facebook, look, your friend you thought you knew hates you. Really? And,
right.
And you could make an incredible horror movie with that,
yeah.
Like, there's some strange coincidences. Sometimes you receive data. Like I remember one of my girlfriends sent pictures to her other lover, and it went to my cell phone and his cell phone at the same time. Why? Of course, she must have made a mistake, or maybe not. Maybe she was insane. But you wonder sometimes to what extent. Like I think the Russians should be careful because what they're experimenting on America could work in Russia too.
Mm-hmm.
There's a boomerang effect to being an idiot. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, they're crazy technologies.
Yeah.
And it goes beyond technology. It's metaphysics at that point.
Yeah, because I don't think your ex-girlfriend, meant to send both of y'all the pictures. I'm going to tell you that right now. She wasn't trying to do all that. No.
I think she was very confused.
Yeah, that was something else going on. Because she wasn't trying to do all that. She wasn't trying to send everybody pictures. No, she wasn't.
You never know. You never
know. Okay.
But technology is speeding up even quicker with COVID, because the day I heard that, which I already knew, that was coming is that 45 million jobs will no longer be around. That's the guesstimate. Within 5 years, because technology has had to speed up so much, which we already knew that because of the COVID. Remember, I told you Wall Street already counted out the people that lost their jobs to the economy. That was already counted out back in March.
They're forgetting something, Venita. All the buildings, now they're discovering that remote work doesn't impede on productivity. All the buildings where you have all the people cleaning up that are needed, they're going to lose their jobs because the building won't have enough renters or enough offices anymore. And you go beyond that. When I realized the world was changing immediately, and it was for years, people were like, hey, McDonald's, why don't you deliver? We don't deliver. We don't deliver. Burger King, Wendy's, deliver. We don't deliver. COVID, we deliver. That means the restaurants won't need, how do they call them? Hosts. They give them a name that's not cashier, to not be offensive.
No, they're hostesses. Hosts.
All of these guys that, people criticize McDonald's, Burger King, sure, but how many kids started as a cashier and ended up a manager with their own franchise?
That's the summer, yes, and those are summer jobs too for college students in restaurants, waiting tables. How do you think they make it? When they get out of college, you can't find a job. You can always go back to that restaurant you worked in through college, wait those tables. All that stuff is going to be gone. But they said 45 million jobs in the next 5 years. But they already counted those out. Like I said, when people lost their jobs, they were counted out. That's why Washington is in no hurry. They said they'll be okay. They really are not in a hurry to give a stimulus package. They're not in a hurry because they're going to shift the people that do survive and don't die from starvation or the results of homelessness, no matter whether it's health or any other way. If those that survive, they're going to die off. The ones who die from COVID, the rest are going to be shifted onto a welfare system of some kind for more control. See, the point is the elites want to be able to know where you are at any given time.
And I'm angry at Democrats because for months they were saying, hey, $600, that's too much. Some people won't go back to their job because of that. And I'm like, yeah, that means their jobs was near slavery.
It was their slavery. Yes.
Seriously, because who can live? $2,100 a month is too much. Who can live with less than that? Even less than, it's insane how they think. And so they didn't want to give that money, that $600.
Yes.
And because welfare is bad. But on the other hand, recently they've released a study. Americans who have saved that money. Nobody spent it because Republicans are saying, oh, they'll buy cigarettes, they'll go to the casino. They saved the goddamn money. They showed that it's the first time in American history, if I heard, that there was such amount of savings among poor families. Poor families saved money.
Yes, I read that. I read that study. That they thought to just go out and be frivolous and spend on liquor, drugs, anything.
Why aren't Democrats putting that to the floor and saying you were wrong? We want the $600 back, non-negotiable?
Because they're all politicians. It's a career. It's a career. Nobody really cares. Come on, Rick. We know that. It's not about us. It's about their career.
Yeah. And those who care get a bullet in the head. We all remember the 60s.
Oh, yes. Yes.
They all got a bullet in the head, one by one. Crazy.
That's right.
And I'm getting me depressed tonight.
No, right.
That'll be so good.
It's the truth.
Yeah. And it's always so-called personal. What always shocked me is that there are conspiracy theories about everything, but very little about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and Bobby Kennedy. And, very little. Like, MLK, yeah, he was shot by a black guy who didn't like him. Okay, nothing to... Malcolm X, yeah, probably Farrakhan. Probably. Is it Farrakhan? With the FBI, what? Come back. Nobody wants to talk about it, ever. Like, these guys just died.
Well, that's that cognitive dissonance. If there's any truth in the conversation, no one ever wants to talk about it, Rick. No matter what it is.
I agree. And, recently I told a so-called progressive friend who lives in Manhattan, I got angry at him and I said, you should read Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. They were not nice people. And I didn't say that, but I said they were fighting. They were not being like, oh, cute birds and we're all friends.
Yeah.
That's not true. They were fighters. Like I told him, Martin Luther King was against peaceful protest if oppression went to a point that he said we should not confuse peaceful protest and cowardice. Right. He was very clear about the difference and when peaceful protests don't work anymore. And Gandhi said the same thing. And a lot of people say Martin spent a lot of time reading Gandhi. So, but it's nobody knows these guys. And that's why I don't like those celebrations about, oh, Martin Luther King, and never Malcolm X, who was a brilliant man. You read his books, you're like, whoa. he was so smart. It was crazy because I don't think he ever found a place where he could talk to people of his level. Unfortunately, he had an idea that was greater than a lot of people could comprehend. And you never talk about them, or you show Malcolm X as an insane racialist, which he wasn't. He was just responding to the enemy. Oh yeah, that's offensive. The enemy.
Well, it was Farrakhan too.
Yeah, no, I agree. Now Farrakhan in the late years are like.
Yeah, but that's in the late years. I mean, we got a lot of things in the late years, but he has said a lot of things that have came to fruition that were actually very, very true.
And without Farrakhan, there's no Malcolm X because he needed a teacher, and he got his teacher. Yes. No, I mean it's strange how people have. It's like Nelson Mandela. When I remind people that he committed terrorist attacks to protect his people don't remember it. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying no, it was a war. Do you understand? And it's strange how people have put these great fighters in a bag of cute little ponies. Seriously,
they have. Yes.
Everything's whitewashed. Yeah, let's say it.
Yeah, that's that. That's the effort to kind of disconnect from reality, which just to kind of connect it to plague. I guess is the same kind of mental process going on, where when you're presented with something that you just don't want to know,
yes,
you find a way not to know it, to deny it, to not hear it.
Americans walk away. In Europe, people yell at you and tell you you're insane. You should. When I talk politics and interesting things and paradoxes to Republicans, white Democrats or Republicans walk away. They just say, I gotta go. They literally walk away. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
No fighting? Like in Europe, it's like, you're a Nazi or you're a communist. It goes like, I hate your guts. Your family is rotten. At least you know who's racist and who's not immediately. Like, it goes really fast in Europe. But here, it's like they walk away.
Of course.
Or get really angry at you. But like,
I like that. I like that attitude, Rick. I say all the time, that's probably why Venita is one of the few people that has been in my life for as long as she has. We don't so much cuss each other out or call each other names, but we do yell and scream and tell each other exactly what we are feeling about whatever the issue is. And I like it because, to me, that's the only way you can have a healthy relationship is if you can lay the cards on the table, because a lot of times people just have misperceptions going on. But if you don't put it out there, what you're really thinking, then there's no way to kind of correct it, or to compromise, or there's no way to move forward. And so, that's a big part of the reason why we keep, with racism in America, keep going around this buggy, century after century after century. Because there is this sickness in this culture that wants to deny reality instead of just deal with it.
Or they want to pretty it up. I don't like prettying up things. Michelle and I do not pretty up. You know, with our friendship, we don't pretty it up.
But true,
and we don't even try to pretty it up. And we don't even verbally agree to disagree. It's just that when the conversation, no, we don't. We never verbally agree to disagree. I have never known us to verbally agree to disagree because I'm not going to verbally agree to disagree to anything I have a strong conviction about, and she ain't doing it. So the conversation pretty much ends when somebody run out of steam. You know, really, like it's time, like it's time to go to bed or something. You know what I'm saying? You know, and you don't get tomorrow morning talking about it either, because the next day we got something else going on. And nobody agrees to this. Have you ever known us agree to disagree? I don't think we've ever done that. Said, okay, Michelle, we'll just agree to disagree. No,
they're passive aggressive.
Right. That's what
and that's the way to say I have the final word because I'm the bigger person here. And you're like, and then Europe would be like, oh, you coward. And people would jump the person like, that's you stay here all night. We are going to berate you into believing we're right.
Well, see, that just shows that we don't function on ego. We don't function on ego as friends. If we function on ego, that would happen. But we don't function on ego. So
it's the same result.
Right,
people
right.
are friends because it's the philosopher Zizek that explains something that Americans are shocked in Europe. When I hang out with Italians or Slovenians and they hang out with the French or the Germans, we insult each other with hugely offensive racist slurs, which is the German is Bosch, the French it's Bundon. It's horrible. Those words you don't pronounce at table, but the reason is, and Zizek was explaining that people understand in Europe, we had 450 wars in 4 centuries. We fought each other and killed each other and raped each other. After that, well, we now know it's peace. And surprisingly, this way of insulting each other and saying, hey, your mother's a, etc., all the time to say hello. Only true friends can do that because we know there's worse than an insult. And also, it's a way to create wit. Now, that's the whole sketch in Europe. There's a sketch of people saying your mother's a whore, etc., to each other. And then the stranger comes in and says, oh, your mother's a whore. And everybody stops and looks at the guy. What did you say? It's a question of, and I think in America, there's no honesty. And there's no, in Europe, people realize you can fail. You can be wrong. Everybody's ridiculous. Everybody gets drunk. It's okay. But in America, there's no forgiveness. You cannot fail. You have to be a winner. You have to be right when you speak.
That's
so
true.
Let's agree to disagree instead of, you idiot, you're not listening to me, and freaking out. It's a good thing. It's like sex. Sex should not be about preparing and calculating. It should also be about, like you said in the 70s, like, yeah, here's an orgy. I'll just step in, step out.
Now it's called date night on the calendar for November the 4th. At 6 o'clock, if it's not raining. So if it is raining, we got an alternative date. It's going to be, November. That's what everything is on the calendar today too. Even with families back then, they had big families. There was still things were spontaneous. I mean, you have regular dinner hour, or if that be the case or whatever. But on a daily basis, things were spontaneous. Now it seems like everything is on the calendar, and if it doesn't go like that, or something throws a wrench in the day, everybody goes like this. I never remember my parents doing that. If things didn't go as planned, oh well. And you didn't have a plan B, it was just spontaneous. Bam, you was on to the next. But today it's not like that. Everything has to be spontaneous. You can't disagree with anyone. You have to fall in line. You have to simulate. You know what I'm saying? It's just so. That's why everything is so. Everything is so unreal because people aren't real. Everything is just imaginary. I mean, nothing's real around you. Yep. Until they're under duress. And then
I'm also thinking about the reality of the scope of weaponry, and what Rick was saying about all the wars they've had in Europe, and we've had some skirmishes here, but nothing like the history of Europe. But we're also at a point in history where when you talk about war, you're really talking about some lethal, some really mass scale shit going on. So I don't know if U.S. citizens will ever really be able to have that level of getting to know each other.
They
Be
at
a
one
little
point,
hand-to-hand combat.
they had at one point.
Uh,
Like, I realized something in Europe. The same poison that is in America right now is coming to Europe. It's French people are becoming insane. German too. QAnon is coming to Europe. And one thing that we have in common is that the people who fought those wars. And I remember when I was a kid, was like, yeah, people need a war. Like, when you're angry when you're a kid. And my grandfather was like, I've I've been through the war. You don't want that. You don't know what you want. Nobody wants that, even for your worst enemy, even Nazis. We wish we didn't have to kill them. So we had this consciousness that war is horrible and not heroic. Like, they would tell us horrible story, like, yeah, we had to cut his legs with rocks. He died. He was 16. You're like, okay, that's war. Yeah, that's daily. And Americans had that with their grandparents and George Bush. Look at when Bush died senior, and everybody was like, what a great president. I was like, what happened? I don't remember Bush Sr. being a good guy, but whatever. But it showed nostalgia for that generation that went through the war, that knew that, what it means. And Obama had this consciousness too when he explained, and people didn't realize what he meant. It wasn't weakness. He killed 30 civilians one day with a drone strike knowingly. He had to. There were 2 terrorists inside who are enemies of America. He did his job as a president, which is not to be nice. And he knows innocent people died. That's why you get the job as president. But he didn't. And look at Trump. What he did, he is such a coward. He didn't attack Iran, or he attacked a little bit, but made sure there were not too many casualties because he doesn't want a major war. He knows that means he'll kill. Like, he said things about killing children and whatnot. So what I'm saying is simply that our generation doesn't realize that hatred is not an emotion. Anger is an emotion. Hatred, it's a plan. You must be. It leads you to consequences I don't think people realize at the personal and collective level. And my big problem with what's happening in America, the racism, is I believe that it means what not Sam Adams, his son, said during the Amistad trial in the Supreme Court, the hearing. And if a war, it was 1848, if I remember, if a war must ensue the emancipation of the slaves, then let it be the last war of the revolution. So the last battle of the revolution, like, he meant that the revolution was not complete until slavery was abolished, the 1776 revolution. Well, I feel it's still not. It still hasn't succeeded, and I'm scared that another civil war will happen because we're still fighting this revolution. Because when you think about it, Trump, it's King George, same kind of people. So,
but I mean, I think it goes to what you were saying about the European sensibility around just getting it all out. We haven't done that. We haven't done that. I mean, as recently as a few weeks ago, Donald Trump is talking about banning the teaching of the 1619 Project.
Yes.
In public schools.
I think he knows what he's doing. Is that he's appealing to a bunch of idiots. Like, my sister lived with a guy who was her roommate for years, and she explained to him something we're taught in European schools, not out of charity but out of jealousy, that Hiroshima and Nagasaki were absolutely unnecessary, that they had already destroyed 90% of Japan, that they just wanted to send a signal, and that the Japanese had asked for, a truce and whatnot, and they ignored it. And so it was not necessary, and it was horrible. And he saw a documentary once. He
wanted to test their new toys.
No, but he got angry at her. Really angry. That America could be evil. Yes, like all countries, like all empires. France has been evil. Look at Madagascar, but we've done great things too. But the problem is not it's like they can't live with the contradiction that you can be great and evil at the same time, and that's a complexity of life. And they try to do something that I hate, like, oh look,
Right.
Africans had slaves too. Yes, but not to that extent, and not industrialized slavery, which is very different from just you're my servant, go get me a coffee, very different.
Right. Right. Yeah, and the same complexity exists in individuals,
Yes.
So, okay, any final comments?
New York's doing well. I'm surprised, despite the
Are we?
clusters. Yeah, our methodology seems to work, and only 8 kids positive from COVID-19 in the school system. Over 111,000 tests. So we're becoming the model for the world. If people would listen to New Yorkers, and the only worry I have is New Jersey and Connecticut because of the surge there. And I just hope that it stops one day. Where I looked at the vaccine data. Bad news today. They have to suspend in Brazil AstraZeneca. Somebody died.
Yeah.
They don't know why. And we're having inflammatory reactions to the vaccine, it seems, but we don't know yet if it's genetics, if it was, but we're far from a vaccine. I don't think we're that close. Everybody's very positive because I think everybody's scared that we won't last another year without utter collapse of society.
Yeah, it's going to happen. And if Donald Trump is reelected, don't worry about COVID bringing it down. It's over. It's just over, and it's over.
And he'll flee on the space capsule, like Space Force, haha, suckers. Because when I look at him, I'm like, why I don't watch him anymore? Because otherwise, he looks, and I think it's his strategy. He doesn't look real. He looks like a cartoon.
He does.
It's not. I think he's smart now. I think he's not an idiot. I'm scared of, because I heard the tapes.
Yeah.
He was aware of the death rate, everything.
Yes.
So he's not an idiot. He's an evil man.
Yeah.
Very evil.
And
absolutely. I just want to read this last question to you guys. Because Rick talked about the statistics in New York. And this question comes out of the section in the chapter 9, where New York built the first aqueduct, to start to bring clean water to the people. They cobblestone the streets, and they started to do some of the cleanliness kinds of things that helped to bring down disease. So my questions were, and yet, even though New York was having these results, there was still this raging debate going on in other cities and countries about, we don't know. We don't know why the people are dying. So my question says, I love New York. What is it that leads New York to be a leader in so many areas, including the novel coronavirus of 2020? How are ignorance and prejudice, the same thing really, helping to exacerbate the current global pandemic? Why do places and people, unlike New York and New Yorkers, seem to have difficulty learning from the models and leadership this city so often provides?
850 nations. That's the answer. Living under the same roof. So you have new ideas, not the same old paradigms. Like this guy's from Pakistan, this guy's from Bangladesh, this guy's from Ivory Coast, this guy's from France, this guy, and they're all New Yorkers. So I think that's the proof that New York works well, because we have lots of different cultures and ideas that have to come together, because otherwise it's already tough enough to see.
Right. Yeah, I think it's an example of the good side of diversity, as well as density, and I've lived in a lot of different parts of the country, and it was just always clear to me that ideas just travel so much faster in a densely populated area like this. And, so you get it. So, but it's just odd to be in this moment where the country had months, really months, to watch what was happening in New York, right? Andrew Cuomo has published a book on lessons learned.
Yeah. The old Cuomo's back. He's back. Our good old Cuomo we hated is back.
Well, I do think Connecticut is a conservative place. And that's another reason why we don't have a lot of COVID here. Also, too, it's a transient place. So we're one of those bedroom states where New Yorkers come here. Massachusetts people come here. New Jersey people come here. So a lot of people bring a lot of stuff to Connecticut because it is that bedroom state, the beautiful country, I picked the kids up from down the Stanford the other day. Monday, the last holiday, Columbus Day or some stupid holiday, was on a Monday. All you saw was New York and New Jersey plates on the way back down south, southern part of Connecticut. So there is, I'm really being honest, it's always been that way, but even more so, well, it's always been that way. They own their houses and their summer homes and this and that. And, they're going to these nice resort places, which are now complaining because they're overflowed with New Yorkers and New Jerseyans that are not going home as they should. That's also causing a COVID problem.
It's kind of
to escape.
Midnight. Aren't you working tomorrow? Aren't you supposed to go back home? No, I'm going to stay home.
I'm really serious. Right. So I'm saying that I think we've done extremely well to be that kind of state where the other states are pouring into our state. Connecticut people ain't run to New York. They're not running to Boston. They're not running to New Jersey. But we are having an influx of people coming from all over.
So I'm going to run.
The housing market, they're buying homes left and right.
Yeah. Okay, enough.
So
I'm going to run.
So I think, in retrospect, if I might look at it even now, we're doing very well to have such an influx of people.
I'm going to run. I'm going to run for president of the tri-state area. We're going to declare independence, and I'm going to build a wall. No more people from Virginia. No more people from Dakota. Enough with these foreigners.
No, we don't do wall. No. Actually, people enjoy people coming here. They really do.
Of course. But only if they come in legally to Connecticut. I'm not taking any Ohioans into Connecticut. I don't trust these people.
And don't bring diseases.
I don't trust Californians. Never did.
We only take New Yorkers, New Jersey people, and a few from Massachusetts. We do have our standards.
Massachusetts, they're kind of enemies. Technically, Boston is a problem.
Really, what I'm talking about, because New York and Connecticut and New Jersey kind of moved in lockstep during the early days of the pandemic, and part of it was precisely because of the back and forth that Venita is talking about. But I'm talking about like middle America, like last night on Rachel Maddow, they had a hospital scene on from Wisconsin.
I care about those people anyway. Why are we talking about Wisconsin?
It's your turn. Sorry.
And it was like it hit them out of the blue kind of a thing.
Yes.
And we're like, guys, do you watch TV? You do, right? So that means you really thought it was our fault.
Yeah.
9/11, you were all over our backs, like, oh, we love you, New York, for months and years, but now COVID, you were like, blue state. Well,
right. It's
how does it feel?
All these kinds of prejudices that Garrett is talking about in her 1995 book. Again, it's just we're just doing the same thing.
But there's been one thing that changed everything, and actually the reason why America exists is the Great Plague, because there was the first time rich and poor alike were hit. The first time so many died all over the place. And when this was all over, the aristocrats were like, we need people to work the land. And the peasants weren't that many anymore. So they said, well, I want land and I'm going to get paid now. And it was the foundation of what we call the bourgeoisie, the capitalists. started with the Great Plague in Europe, and they're the ones who finance America. Why did people want to go to America? Because we had this whole population had no status anymore because they were born from orphans a century ago. So those families were like untouchables. And guess who they sent to slaughter people? The untouchables. Cortez was persona non grata in Spain.
Yes, it
They
was.
were all in debt, and they were told not to invade originally, and they did it because they thought about gold. They had debts. So I always say the same thing. If you look at European history, you understand how power works. It's true. Europe mastered power. We don't have any resources. We're still big powers. We have nothing, but we're still around. Why? We lost the war. Because we know, like the French, we lost the war, but we made everybody believe we won it. It's power.
Well, there's a question in here. I just got to read it. Question 19. One view on the cause of syphilis explosion starting in 1495 related to social upheaval. Following the Black Death of the 14th century, most of Europe experienced 2 or 3 generations of disarray and lawlessness. Death had taken a toll on the city's power structures, and in many areas, the worst of the survivors, the most avaricious and corrupt, swept in to fill the vacuums. The crime rate soared, blasphemy and sacrilege was a commonplace. The rules of sexual morality were flouted. The pursuit of money became the be-all and end-all of people's lives, Philip Ziegler wrote. The world was suddenly full of widows, widowers, and adolescent orphans. None felt bound by the strictures of the recent past. Godliness had failed their dead friends and relatives. Indeed, the highest percentage of deaths had occurred among priests. Europe, by all accounts, remained so disrupted for decades. And so my question was, what does that suggest to you about survivors?
And remember, it's the same. Those are the same people that were sent. You know how we got rid of them? We sent them to the colonies. And since they didn't have any structures, they didn't know how to work. Nobody ever asked the question why Europeans never had slaves in Europe, black slaves. We didn't need them. We used black slaves to colonize America with these guys, these crooks, these very violent individuals, and we knew what we were doing. What I'm saying is that, white Americans talking about white supremacy should read about the Great Plague and remember where they come from. They're not pure, technically. They would be considered inferior by Nazis, which they were, by the way. So, you never win.
Their descendants.
But this is the thing about purity, racial purity. It doesn't exist. I'm sure in my family we had everybody in their lineage must have had a genocider, a murderer, a rapist. We've been around for thousands of years as a species, millions of years even. So it's like Ben Affleck got angry when he discovered that one of his ancestors was a slave master. Yeah, you're white. It's bound to happen at one point that among your friends, one of us, or many of us actually, I mean, my parents bet my great-grandfather made a lot of money in Morocco. Morocco wasn't free. He probably treated Moroccans like shit. But I love my grandfather, but people don't understand that you can love somebody while knowing he was a shitty person as well. It's most of us. And yeah, I'd say that that's my problem with coronavirus. Is it going to disrupt society longer than just 3-4 years, but decades?
Oh, decades.
Yeah. And who is going to win if it's the same kind of people who came from Europe and destroyed the world, technically? What's coming after that?
That's my concern. That's my concern. And, just even before coronavirus, that we could be at a place where we would almost elect a Donald Trump, that we are now about to put Aunt Lydia on the Supreme Court. We got problems beyond coronavirus.
But then we have problems.
Women, are you allowed to speak to a man tonight? I'm sorry. I'm adapting to the new Supreme Court.
But then we have problems that when black people have no rights. I mean, the only thing that, I mean, it's the same thing. Like we have problems. We have the same problems with black folks that have any rights. And you have the lunatics up in the White House saying and making laws that you could do anything you want to do to a black person. They were subhuman. You could burn them in the middle of the street.
That's what they
You
did.
could rape them, kill them, hang them.
Yeah.
This is no different. So why is everybody saying, "Oh my Lord Jesus, I'm black"? They did this before. They had lunatics, obviously, like Donald Trump, in the White House many times before.
They never stopped.
You have to be a lunatic in the White House. You have to be a lunatic on the Supreme Court to treat other humans subhuman like they did. So Donald Trump is not the first rogue president, not being a black person. Now, white folks may have a different thing going on.
He is the first president of our lifetime to be out holding public rallies talking about lock
But what I'm trying to say is he is the first one of our lifetime. But for
there's a blatantness to his behavior that differentiates him from other
I think he's the first to be too lazy to pretend.
That's only in our lifetime because they've actually been presidents and other politicians that talk the way Donald Trump has talked.
Reagan.
He's not the first person that's spoken the way he has. It's a shock to us. We ain't heard it for a while.
Reagan.
And in our generation, we haven't heard it. But I asked my grandmother if she was alive, has she heard and seen this before?
She did.
I mean, this is not new. Supreme Court, we're talking about abortion rights and other rights in the Supreme Court. We didn't even have a right to be human per the Supreme Court. So this is what I'm saying. It's like this generation, we're in shock. But this is not the first time you've had a president speak that way.
No, he's too lazy to pretend.
Except you were either enslaved or you were under Jim Crow laws. So it wouldn't have made a difference to you anyway, because you had no right to even be a human being. The white folks, the only ones who were affected then. No, remember who was the lower caste people. So that's why I'm like, everybody's in shock. Yeah, there might be a shock for this generation to hear that again, because we thought we made progression. That's the only shock factor for me, is I thought we had progressed. Where you wouldn't have the McCarthys of the nation saying segregation now, segregation forever. I mean, really? So no, none of this is not a new president speaking that way. It may be new for white folks because they never had a president speak about that way about white folks in the United States.
About everybody. No, he's too lazy to pretend. He's too lazy to pretend. Reagan.
Right. Last word to Rick.
No, there was this phone call that was released of Ronald Reagan calling Nixon when he's governor of California about the Black Panthers coming to the steps of the local legislator with guns, and he was incensed, and they released a phone call, and Nixon, dirty dick, wasn't a nice man. He's shocked by how racist Reagan is. Nixon is, because Reagan uses the N-word and calls them monkeys and calls the guys from this delegation in Burkina Faso or another African nation whatnot because they voted against something and the UN. And Nixon, and you still hear Nixon, everything's recorded, and he's like talking to his aide after the call. He's like, that was like uncalled for. Nixon.
But he didn't go on CBS or Facebook.
That's the difference, because before it was make believe. Because white people, he wanted to believe racism was over. So we needed somebody to tell us it was over and just some bad apples. Now white people have had the change of heart and they want to be racist again. So now they want a president who's racist.
And it's more acceptable. We have social media. They didn't have social media back then. They have primed us for years to get us.
You could get your ass kicked if you talk like on social media in the street, like, "Hey, you! I'm gonna cut your head and kill your wife."
You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's really nothing new. It's nothing new. Donald Trump is just another old white man with the same old white thoughts.
He's the first one to reveal something to all politicians. That's what worries me. Why do you pretend? You don't even need to pretend. What? Yeah. And that's like when friends tell me, oh, they need to lie to us to go to war. I'm like, no, they just go to war. What you're gonna do? Well, look, they went to Iraq. They don't need to lie. If I'm president one day, you know what I do? I go to war. People say, where you go to war? Evil people. Evil, bad. Ooh, kill children. Okay. That's it. So people are cowards. You know, it's just, and they have no political mindset. So, but yeah, hopefully, November 3rd.
Yes.
Okay, November 3rd. Back here on, what is it, November 4th is our next meeting?
Maybe, yeah. So the day after.
Maybe by then we will have something to smile about, because y'all got me depressed tonight.
Well, no,
don't be depressed.
We didn't talk about anything depressing. Actually, we just talk about what's happening right now. And that's depressing. I know, Michelle, but that's what's happening right now.
No, yeah.
Hopefully by November 4th, we will all be happy.
I want Amy Conner to have a present for her November 4th. I want God, if God exists, to do something. I know it's wishing ill, but I like something interesting to happen. I like both Joe Biden and Donald Trump to die at the same time. On November 3rd at 11:59 p.m. And then, Amy, good luck with that one. Who's the president now? Why me?
Only you would think of that, Rick.
Like, oh my God! I think the president's Nancy Pelosi. Oh! Everybody
my goodness. My goodness.
It's so sinister. All right, y'all. Have a good week. Happy voting. Happy plague reading. And wear your mask.
Okay. Good night. Good night, Rick. Good night, Michelle.
Bye. Take care.
Good night.